is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. 169 cops lose out as judge overturns police promotion process. Squeezy Rankin wins Young Kings Calypso crown. Trade Minister says no support for cement price hike. And SOE operations lead to 5 arrests, drugs and cash seized. Now for the details. Squeezy Rankin is the 2025 Young Kings champion. The Calypsonian Anthony LaFleur triumphed over 17 other contestants to earn the title. He won performing his popular single Justice, whose message has resonated with the public. He even offered a solution at the competition on February 18th, telling parents to teach their children values so he would not have to sing the song. It deals with how mothers respond when their good sons believed to be criminals are killed. Kyle Cowie placed second with Western Town, a song reflecting on a past era. Mohammed Mawakil placed third with Take Me Home, a personal song. Johan Duncan, performing as Slasher, placed fourth with A Good. Devon Martin, Lyrical, placed fifth with Dotish, a song addressing social issues. Doran Greenidge placed sixth with America Has Spoken, which discussed international affairs. The event was held at Queen's Park, Savannah, Port of Spain, and is annually organized by the National Action Cultural Committee. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service must restart its entire promotion process for officers seeking to advance from the rank of Inspector to Assistant Superintendent of Police. On February 18th, High Court Judge Frank C. Prasad delivered his decision in a lawsuit which challenged the promotion process for Assistant Superintendents of Police. He also refused to grant a stay of his order because the breaches were so fundamental and egregious. Inspector Mark Hernandez filed a judicial review claim which questioned compliance and fairness of the performance appraisal and promotion process. In a strongly worded judgment, C. Prasad laid bare the deep flaws of the process, calling it deficient and defective. He ruled the breaches of statutory obligations were significant and undermined the integrity of the system designed to identify the most capable officers for leadership roles. He also said the process revealed a cascade of errors and regulatory breaches which were neither isolated nor de minimis, but rather numerous, substantial, seemingly deliberate, pervasive, and profound. Trade Minister Paula Gopi-Skoon has said the government does not support Trinidad Cements Limited's latest proposed price hike and is calling for more suppliers in the market. She said increasing cement prices had been a challenge for the government over the past few years and remained a hot topic. If the price hike is implemented, it will mark the 5th price increase since December 2021 by TCL. At the Trade Ministry, we're not happy, she said. On February 6th, the Contractors Association announced a price hike for cement effective February 17th for retail users and March 5th for bulk users. The association said the increase will affect the overall cost of construction. She said 2 main concerns of the government are the consumer and the industry. Gopi-Skoon said her ministry wants to ensure the industry remains viable. State of emergency operations in the Central Division on Tuesday, February 18th, resulted in 5 arrests and the seizure of narcotics, ammunition, and cash. In Claxton Bay, police apprehended 2 men after discovering cocaine and ammunition at a Diamond Road residence. One suspect, who initially fled and provided false information, was later identified as a wanted man from Moruga. Meanwhile, in Valencia, officers arrested a suspect linked to the February 14th theft of $64,000 from a parked vehicle in Endeavor. Authorities recovered $10,000 TT, $2,000 US suspected counterfeit, and tools used for breaking glass. Additionally, 2 men were detained during a road surveillance exercise, one for cocaine possession and the other for cannabis. Investigations continue. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Attention everyone! The Office of the Prime Minister Communications has launched a brand new WhatsApp channel designed to keep you informed and connected like never before. Get real-time updates, breaking news, and important information directly from the source. With our WhatsApp channel, you'll always know what's happening when it's happening. Joining is easy. Use your phone camera, scan this QR code, tap follow, and that's it. You're in. Be sure to tap the notification bell to never miss an update. Stay informed, stay empowered. Join the conversation with the Office of the Prime Minister Communications WhatsApp channel today.
WESN.
It's sometimes not what they say, but what they don't say. And then sometimes it might be a very minor, you could argue, it could be a nitpick with regards to when you look at a statement and you ask yourself, well, what did they not say? And maybe they didn't say it a certain way. Maybe they didn't include a certain detail, but they said something like what you're looking for or what you think is not represented. And of course, action speaks louder than words. So at times, you're utilizing the context of what you don't see happen, and then you look at a statement, and you see where what you don't see happen corresponds with details that are missing in what was said, so details that are missing, details that were not said. And those things at times could be telling. Of course, you still have to accurately interpret it. What does it mean? Is it an indicator of an agenda or lack of agenda, of a motivation or lack of motivation? A capacity or lack of capacity, proficiency or lack of proficiency? It could mean many things at the end of the day, unless there's more details. And of course, more details are subject to interpretation. So it's just one of those things where you have to be careful with how you analyze something in order to formulate an opinion. But one of the topics, which I think is one of those where you have two sides on an issue, at least depending on the context, you have two sides. If the context is clear-cut, one side might be cut off. But generally speaking, squatting has two sides to the issue. One side is squatting is illegal. The other side is but compassion for the people, which only rarely comes into play when certain circumstances occur which indicate that the situation kind of already got out of control. So, one of the cabinet ministers, Housing and Urban Development Minister Camille Robinson-Regis, is saying that the government, this is what's reported, it doesn't condone squatting, but it does what it can within the law. Okay. The quote is, "Let me be clear, the government of Trinidad and Tobago has never turned a blind eye to the issue of squatting. It has tackled squatting with structured policies, legislative frameworks, and long-term solutions, not short-term political gimmicks." That's cool. But while she has stated directly squatting is illegal, what was not included with the government plans to deal with squatting is enforcement of the law. Because herein lies the problem. Enforcing the laws and removing squatters from state lands or private lands is fine or is obviously not a problem when it now starts. When they kind of put some kind of temporary makeshift whatever that doesn't really cost much of anything, doesn't really have much effort, right? Or maybe they started constructing a permanent building, you know, with real serious amounts of concrete, cement blocks, steel reinforcement, foundation, all kind of thing. If you stop them before they started the work, well, that's fine. But if now you've reached 5 years, 6 years, 7 years later, and they've added additions to the house and all kind of madness, now it's not illegal or not wrong legally, and to some extent one could even argue, the debate is, well, they're breaking the law, but if we mash down their house, how much of their personal net worth are we essentially destroying? Is it right legally? Is it right ethically? And therein is where you have the debate. But the key point that I was saying before, and that I want to make again now, is the whole compassion side of squatting rarely comes into play when it gets out of hand. When squatters have already put so much money into this house and dwelling and the land, etc., etc. When you allow them to, I mean, at the end of the day, they're robbing somebody of some land, whether it's state or private. But now all of a sudden it's harder for people to be willing to take a hardline approach because it has gone beyond the point of reason. And to some extent, I do have a little bit of a pushback to that. Because yes, there are some who they might not know any better, they might not have no other choice, or at least they think they don't have any other choice. And they are not necessarily bad intention. But then there are those who understand the system and they calculate. And they say, well, you know, once I get to a certain point, what are they going to do, remove me? And they bank on the fact that you're going to have saps who are going to be like, oh no, let's not remove them. Now, how do you know for sure who is who? Who is taking advantage of your emotions and who is, unfortunately, in a poorly thought out situation? Because the latter are well thought out their situation. Understand that, believe that. They're playing the system like a fiddle. And this is why the law, to some extent at least, has to be objective. Yes, you need flexibility to be able to treat with different situations because no situation is exactly the same, right? I mean, I don't believe we have it, but not all murder is the same. A serial killer is not at the level as somebody who get into a fight and in a crime of passion ends up killing the person they're fighting with. Or maybe they're fighting somebody who did something to a family member of theirs, and I don't want to necessarily spell it out too far. But you understand what I'm saying. Those are not the same exact things. It's still, you know, depending on the circumstances, wrong, and there still need to be consequences for it. But at the end of the day, sometimes, look, the law, to be fair, and to prevent being taken advantage of at times, needs to be like, listen, the law is the law, and you can't use some backdoor justification to circumvent the law. So, again, back to the point. All of these things would not be an issue if included in the way the government treats squatting is that the law will be enforced to prevent citizens from investing in lands that they don't own to the point where now it becomes a debate on what to do with them. To the point where now that they have sunk too much into these lands, and to remove them, as much as we want to say the law is the law and we need to remove them and knock down the house, it can, because it's not just one situation we're talking about. Oftentimes we're talking about multiple situations, and then you have the practical reality of the economy probably does not want to take on the burden of having so many people lose the homes that they reside in. I don't want to say their homes. And then you have very real economic implications of just wiping out that amount of value out of the economy, no matter how illegal it is. So what do you do? Well, again, for the third time, the obvious low-hanging fruit answer is to simply enforce the law from the start. And then all of these other programs that you have, all of these structured policies and legislative frameworks and long-term solutions, whatever that means, like the Home and Village Improvement Program, then it comes into play. You tell them, no, you cannot build there when they start, or even before they start. That's state land. That's private land that you don't own. You can't build there. And then we introduce we have X, Y, and Z for you. We don't let people build a life somewhere, whether rightfully or wrongfully, and then have to now scramble and deal with a larger problem. Prevention is cheaper and is less damaging than the cure. Because once you have to use a cure, you're inflicting whatever the disease is on the body. It's not a good look. All right, not going to take a break. I want to go straight into today's daily review. All right, so a couple of things to get through before the end of the week. The first one is the fact that there was a question about the legal fees, and I believe there is a legal action after two separate Freedom of Information Act requests with regards to legal fees paid to attorneys representing the state were made. And this is just one of those things where, again, I find it very interesting that essentially the government's defense of this situation is to point out, and indirectly is probably the best, the most generous way I could frame it, a failure of the current situation. Because at the end of the day, if this was year one, it's not your fault. Year two, or maybe it's not your fault. We're now basically in year 10. And while I don't expect crime to be something that could be solved completely in 10 years, the fact that arguably it's gotten worse does not bode well for the government when they're basically saying, well, we can't, and they have continued on this. The Office of the AG is saying, given the prevailing crime situation where extortion has been increasing and lawyers have become more frequent targets for criminals, it is unreasonable to disclose the public fees earned by lawyers in these circumstances. Well, first of all, I would just like to point out, so you're saying lawyers are the only potential areas of the state that could be victims of extortion? If it's that easy, should we ask if public servants and politicians may have also become victims of extortion? We're not necessarily hearing anything about that. We haven't heard anything about lawyers becoming targets of extortion. What's going on? Are you just saying that the crime situation is so devolved that lawyers working for the state are that easy targets? I would like to know. Because that vulnerability might extend. More importantly, I think the state kind of needs to understand, because they tried to do, and I don't know how successful it was, I just found it was ridiculous. They tried to defend a bad situation by revealing another bad situation. So with regards to the porous borders, at least at one point, the statement was made, well, the illegal guns aren't coming through the porous borders, you know. That's entirely wrong, because they're coming through the legal ports of entry, not the illegal ones. And I couldn't help myself and say, how is that better? How is it better to say that the illegal guns, which by the government's intelligence estimates are in the tens of thousands, and that probably undersells the figure. I can't remember what the estimate was, but it wasn't only 10,000, right, if my memory serves correct. How is this a defense of the maritime border security situation? Oh, no, they come through the legal ports of entry. You know, the ports of entry where the scanners, generally speaking, seemingly don't work all the time. You know, those ports of entry. You know, the ports of entry that we actually have direct control over as the government, oh no, that's where the illegal guns are coming through. And by that same philosophy, they're saying, oh no, we can't reveal things to the public in the interest of transparency because crime is so bad that we will put lawyers at risk. It's that bad. I mean, we could put out government MPs and public servant salaries up and down the place. But the lawyers, oh no, somehow they are especially vulnerable. I mean, to me, it's a pretty weak defense, to be honest. Because again, if we had a situation where, all right, we have over the last 2 to 3 years, multiple lawyers get extorted, get blackmailed, criminal trials get, you know, undermined and stuff like that, okay, fine. Then we have an actual practical problem that needs to be solved. That's why I said, well, it seems as though you are concerned over hypothetical. Well, what about the hypothetical of why are we not worried about public servants, legal clerks, judges, elected officials, corporation, councilmen and aldermen, parliamentarians? Are we not worried about extortion hitting them too? Where is the pattern of behavior to say that you have a direct concern over this situation? Or is it, I don't know, you just don't want to reveal the money paid because you don't want any political backlash because you lack the capacity to properly communicate something and defend your decisions, including defending who you hired to represent you, how much money you paid to represent you, and in what cases they represented you with. Let's not forget, no one has provided a reasonable explanation as to why the AV drilling case was not appealed by the state. Let's not forget, no one has offered a reasonable explanation with regards to the Privy Council taking the Auditor General's matter. We haven't even actually reached to the legal challenge. The permission to allow her to take this situation, to challenge it, I believe it's judicial review. That's what was being decided, and it was taken all the way to the Privy Council. And essentially, the Privy Council said, why is this here? You have nothing. The state of Trinidad and Tobago has nothing. They have less than nothing. They have less than nothing because we don't even need to hear from the Auditor General's representative. It was an obvious losing case that lost at every level of our judicial system. And yet, somebody had the bright idea, you know what, maybe the Privy Council that has ruled against us on big cases in the past will somehow give us a bly for no good reason, just because maybe they like us and they don't want to admit it. Is that the thought? I don't know what the reasonable explanation is, but it points to the fact that there is a lack of ability to justify certain decisions coming out of the Office of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs. So is that what this is? Is that what this inability to state what the legal fees are? Because again, if there was a specific threat, fine. Point us to anything to justify the concerns of that specific threat. Because if you just want to give us, you know, the general statement of, well, if we do that, given extortion, which currently right now, as far as we're aware, the pattern of behavior in extortion is to go after businessmen, not lawyers. But hey, you want to put that out there, that somehow lawyers are a vulnerable target. Why? So I have to ask, why are we not concerned about a whole host of other people being targets of extortion? And then maybe, it's extortion, right? Or blackmail? Well, if it's extortion, maybe we shouldn't give the Prime Minister extra money because he might get extorted once he leaves office. Who knows? We don't have any other concerns about extortion hitting anything to do with the public purse or anyone indirectly connected to the public purse anywhere else. I mean, so is it that you know that there are people compromised in government? I don't know, like soldiers, like police officers? Are you privy to politicians, elected officials being compromised? Are you part of the compromise? Like, how do you know, how do you reach this point on this specific thing? Or, like I said, you have regularly tripped over your own feet with the inability to explain certain decisions undertaken by lawyers representing the state, or by the state with regards to what cases it wants to pursue, or by the state with regards to decisions on how or what to appeal, etc., etc., etc. So again, transparency is something that politicians do not understand how it works, how to utilize it, and essentially, while not always true, it is usually a safe assumption to make that if you are trying hard to hide something, then there's something there that you actually want to remain hidden that we're not going to like. And the more you give us these Mickey Mouse excuses, the more we're going to want to find out what it is, because the more we're going to suspect you of something bad. And at the end of the day, now I get it, Trinbagonians are not necessarily the strongest when it comes to expressing themselves and seeing through any issue. But it's adding to the perception of a government that's not so hot, that's not doing right by the people. And we're going into the election year. And the sad part is, there doesn't have to be anything bad, but you're doing things to make yourself look bad. So what do you expect the people to think? All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll welcome my guest. Stay tuned. We're going to actually switch gears to the election politics. There's more to talk about now with Dr. Sheikh Mohammed. I did say that we were going to have him Tuesday, but the schedule didn't work out. We have him here today. We'll be right back with him and more after this.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus, quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
And we're back here on Talking Point on WESN, the Content Capital Show. Michael Small, joined by political analyst, geopolitical analyst, and dare I also include in the introduction, lecturer, Dr. Sheikh Mohammed, extraordinaire. Dr. Mohammed, just by the way, before we get into the topic, You don't just necessarily lecture on political science, do you?
No,
Because your
I
MBA course
actually
is on something
MBA
else.
students in business and business administration and management courses. Yeah, communication. Yeah, not just politics and international relations.
Communications. I know we put out a lot of good, well, at least I think, you know, the country actually produces a lot of good PR students because, ironically, the average level of intelligence of public relations students because I am technically halfway through one of those programs myself, is actually higher than the average level student in general. And I'm just like, what are we doing wrong that some of our brightest is going in a profession that is ignored by the people that need it the most?
They feel they understand strategy. So a lot of people believe that they know strategy because they've been, so let's just take, for example, political practitioners. Political practitioners believe that they understand strategy better than anyone because by virtue of their success in the political arena, while is based on some level of strategy, a lot of people don't take into consideration they throw out, in other words, the theories behind strategy, the theories behind leadership, the theories behind political behavior, traits, characteristics, you name it, because we've been in this longer than, you know, Moses was alive, and therefore what we say is gospel. A lot of people disrespect, there's a lot of disrespect, and there's also a belief that the only people qualified to be in politics are lawyers.
Well, I mean, I always think, I think one of the issues we have is not that our politicians are dumb, it's that they're trapped. They trap themselves within the box of, well, this is how things are. This is what we've seen work. And it's a very limited, ironically, everyone says we're a young country, right? We've had a few elections, yes, but to some extent, we can't say that we've done everything and tried everything with regards to things like political strategy. So it seems like they're stuck in the box of, well, this is how things are. And it's potentially far more limited than we think because they kind of just repeat the same one or two strategies each election cycle. And I guess so far they've gotten away with it. No one has called them out on it. And I guess in part because we haven't really gotten a better alternative to those strategies from anyone else. I don't know if you would agree with that.
No, I think it's important. So you're going to put me in an academic, you're driving me into the academic mode today. And one of the things that I talk about a lot in innovation and entrepreneurship is value capture and value creation and value proposition. And the notion of value proposition is the understanding of from the beginning to the end of producing a product or service, the processes involved, the theories involved, the business models that are involved, the key personnel that are involved, and understanding where the gaps are in creating and capturing that value. And when you create and capture that value, how do you use that value that you've captured, whether it is, and one of it is tied into the concept of innovation sustainability and like political science, it positions the organization or the entrepreneur to create and capture value that sustains the organization, to give it competitive advantage, not just in the short term, but in the long term. But it also challenges organizations and companies to reevaluate their business model and to reevaluate their strategies as it pertains to branding, marketing, communication, what the value of the product, the quality of the product, and where the product stands with regard to competitive advantage in the market. What part of the market segment does it attract? This is how it's done, and we've been doing it for the last 40 years, and we are comfortable with it. And if that is the case, you can't quarrel, argue, and cuss your staff members because this is how it's done for the last 30, 40 years. I mean, there are companies in Trinidad and Tobago in which my students have to do real assignments and real investigations. And they've come up with some organizations that are very, they have big names in Trinidad, and they've come up with the reasons why companies have not expanded, they've not created better products, their limitations with regard to creating products, why they have one location, one manufacturing space, why they haven't gone outside of Trinidad and Tobago because of the all the different reasons. And I mean, we've done, like in my last cohort of students who are currently preparing their final report for this particular assignment, they're writing their report on two organizations, two really good companies in Trinidad and Tobago. And I always tell my students, I say, and these are MBA students, so they're at a very high level in terms of management and leadership within their respective fields. I tell them, I said, you all are put into a group to become a fictional consultancy, but when you get graded and you're marked, and if it's a really good mark and a really good report that you've come, investigation, an analysis you've done, approach the organization and say, this is what we found in our studies and in our investigation, and this is what we think you all should do. Now, that also speaks to how much research and development, how much R&D is an organization pursuing and and getting involved in to ensure that it is keeping up its standard and it's up to par to its competitors, both locally, regionally, and internationally. Applies to very much to political parties and how they create and capture value, sustain that value, use that value in the long term, in the long term, not just over a 5-year period, because a 5-year period is not long term, it's short to medium, and it's a means to an end. And you don't use value and create value as a means to an end. If you're doing that, it's not sustainable for long-term growth and development, progress, and all the other things that come with success, a good governance and all of that in a political party setting. So it's people don't like to see it how it is, but I take it because I traverse both the politics and the business, and I see it as a merger. I could use it. I mean, there's politics in business, there's politics in leadership, there's politics in commerce, there's politics in trade. It's how you meander that politics and how you use the political understandings that you have in terms of what you offer, how you offer it, how you position it, how you present it, how you package it. And quite frankly, we haven't really started the political journey per se in Trinidad and Tobago. The tempo is not, at its, it's not even, the tempo has not even started, and I'm exhausted already, my friend.
The thing is, you're right, there's strategy in politics, there's strategy in business. And strategy, understanding how to be strategic, how to make decisions at that level. There's a reason why there are some who are not in the military, they read Sun Tzu's Art of War, right? Because they're trying to get insights on mindset, on how to structure your thought process, on how to approach decision making with regards to strategic decisions. And this actually, it segues into where I wanted to go this morning, because the whole part about new value propositions, we're seeing the two main parties. Of course, they're new parties, so in theory, all new parties are new value propositions. But the two incumbent parties of parliament, the opposition and the government side, we're seeing a little bit of a transition with the UNC, not as much. Obviously, there are some seats for various reasons that are going to have new candidates. And then with the PNM, we're seeing some older politicians kind of, whether informally or formally, I don't know if they formally said this publicly, but there seems to be some amount of desire for change and having younger candidates, at least in a few seats. And now I guess the question is, for both the PNM and the UNC, and you could break it down to party by party, are these new candidates new value propositions? Because in theory, the old guard eventually, no one could defeat Father Time. That's what they say in sports. It's also true in politics. And when, we're years removed from the current senior politicians being retired, you're just bound to have some sort of a change. But are these new politicians, are they really new value propositions? Will they be supported trying to put the party or start the party in a new direction? Or, as I have seen before, and I don't know if other people agree with this, but I'll just say it, I have seen new politicians in the parties PNM and UNC in the last 5 years, they basically they follow the old way of doing things because they want to conform, and it's really hard to say, you know, they're giving us anything new. They're just giving us a younger version of what we had before.
Well, okay, so what I've done and what I've been doing is that I'm doing a comparative analysis. I'm doing a comparative analysis on paper. So I'm looking at it from on paper, and then I'm looking at it visually, and I'm also looking at it from a practical perspective, right? And when you look at the PNM's list, which is you want to look at the most now to scrutinize the most, one, because they're incumbent, two, because they have a full, more or less a full list, right? And you go through the list of people on the PNM listing. There are, in terms of seniors, there's D.L. Singh, there's Beckles, there is Imbert, and there's Camille Robinson Regis. Those are seniors, right? So you have 4 seniors. I'm talking about people who've had years and years of service in the party. Then you have the not so seniors, but who've been around for a while, which would be the Stewarts. You would have Stewart, you would have Shamfer, you would have Alwari. Does it? Yeah. They would have been around since 2010, Randall Mitchell. So you've had that coming in from 2010, you know, building as they go along. And then you have Webster Roy as well, 2010. Then you have the ones that have come in, and Esmond Ford, which is 2010, which you've had coming from 2010. So you have a 15-year period by which they had, 15, I'm talking about, it's in 2010, 2015. These people, you'd have them have a 10-year period by which they had an opportunity to settle in, to understand what is to be done. They've had a chance to perform. They've had a chance to serve as ministers, and that whatever, right? And then you look at the ones who've been around for the last 5 years, like the Marvin Gonzalez, the Kennedy Richards, your Brian Manning. You have who else?
Is this list limited to MPs?
Yes, this list is limited to the MPs because MPs so senators are not counted because they're not the ones that are they're not going to be the face of the party in terms of an election, right?
Right.
So you have these people who've been in the party and they've had a 15 to 10 year to 5 year period training ground. Now, the truth of the matter is, on paper, it looks quite attractive. I'll be real. I'll be honest. It looks very attractive on paper. What these people have working against them is that while they look really good on paper, while they'll take beautiful photos, while it would look very mixed, very diverse and reflective of the Trinidad and Tobago context, when you narrow it down to who's actually going to win possible seats, the winning slate, the winning people, is going to come down to three segments. One, you're going to get your Coco Payal, you're going to get your what we call local white kind of, Syrian kind of look, and then you're going to get the Afro-Trinidadians, and then you're going to have a little mix in the middle of, that's the Coco Payal Douglas kind of look. So the look is going to come down to, it will look like a high society kind of finish. The problem here with this is that these people have a reputation that they've not performed well in the last 10, 15 years. They've not done well. Between 2010 and 2025, which is 10 years, they've not done a really good job at governing Trinidad and Tobago. They've not delivered in health services. They've not delivered in crime and security. They have not delivered in securing us with regard to food security. They've not diversified the economy. In fact, while they boast of their economic survival, is what they talk about in very fancy words, economic survival. While they've talked about, they're going to talk about how much they've meandered the pandemic. Okay, other people too. A lot of people outside there, a lot of governments outside there meander the pandemic even more successfully than Trinidad and Tobago. The fact of the matter is, our economy has contracted. Our purchasing power has been is limited. There's only a few. The society is very much divided between the haves and the have-nots. So, where is the performance? I open the papers today and I see 500 new homes to be constructed for squatters. Where was this planned 10 years ago? Why is it that we're not seeing 500 new homes to be handed out to squatters having been built in the last 3 to 5 years? Why is everything suddenly an intention to do this, an intention to do that, a plan to do this, a plan to do that? So what we was doing all the time. So and another thing that I have a real issue, and he thinks he'll probably think I have a target on his back, but I said this on another station, I'll say it again here. One of the biggest problems of the current administration is their lack of communication, their poor communication, and their approach to communication. So you've had a whole Minister of Communications for 10 years, right? You've had a whole Minister of Communications.
5 of those years it was its own separate ministry.
5 of those years with their separate ministry. A whole minister gets a whole ministry with a whole fancy salary and all the perks that come with it. And yet, the communication has been poor. And yes, and yet government communication has failed, and yet government communication has been one that has not been relatable, has not explained much, has not divulged much information. But we've had ministers buff the whole country, the Prime Minister coming back at everybody and insult the whole media. That's not good communications, that's not even good PR. So, and that person get back his job in front of Amy Brown, who should be a member of parliament and who should be on the list to be elected. Come on, man. Let me be real. That's bad. Well, I mean, their politics is a politics of convenience.
Do the new faces, the new MP candidates, do they offer anything that would make you think, the direction at least has a chance to go somewhere different than what we've seen so far? Because I guess that's one of the disadvantages of being the incumbent, right? You know, being the incumbent says, you know, do you want more of the same? And more often than not, after you get to the second term, the answer usually is no, we don't want a third term. We didn't want Al Gore. We didn't necessarily, I mean, Kamala Harris, technically, that would have been the potential second term, and they rejected that. So we have Kareem Marcel and I think Hansi Wiens and Diego Martin.
Right. So that's what I was going to tell you, right? When you look at the new names, the new candidates you're talking about, let's be real. So you're looking at the new names with potential, and I'm using potential and then looking at people who has the ability to win. The potential new candidate who has the ability, who could possibly, and I'm using it loosely because it all depends on strategy, it depends on favorability, it depends on, you know, the attractiveness, whatever. My eyes will always be on Barataria Sawa with Dr. Mohammed Yunus Ibrahim. That's new. Then the second one is Shogunas East, which is Richie Sukai, which is new. And then my other name that I have in the mix that I will be looking on is Lisa Atwater, which is down in Maruga Tableland. That is new. Those are 3 seats that you need to watch.
You're not saying that they have a great chance of winning, but rather those are interesting.
Those are the 3 marginal seats that I have to watch in terms of, right? So those are the 3 that I'm going to be looking at specifically. Now, when you look at winning candidates, you have Hans, that's Hansi Wiens. You have Birchwood, which is Laventille East Morva. You have Dominic Romaine, which is Malabar Mausica. You have Laventille West, which is Kareem Marcel. That's 3. If I go down the list,
I think that's 4 actually.
Who is it for? Who's the 4th one you're watching?
Yeah, I think you had the 2 Laventilles, Diego Martin, and oh gosh, the one more east, just before Kareem, I think. You now said it, I can't remember.
Barataya Sawa?
Or was it? No. Anyway.
The 4 brand new people that they brought in that in my book that will win their seat is Hans, which is Diego Martin West.
Yes.
Christian Birchwood, which is Laventille East Mova. Dominic Romaine, which is Dabadi O'Mara, now Mausica Malabar.
That's yeah.
And the 4th one is Kareem Marcel, which is Laventille West. 4 people out of 41, and then on a realistic perspective, 4 people in a possible 20 seats, 20, 21 seats make a difference. The rest having come from the incumbency and having either, well, some has transferred from Senate to the House. And really the winnability is, the person that is most likely to win is, in that regard, is Randall Mitchell. So Randall Mitchell returns to the House as a member of Parliament in Labrie, depending on how people in Labrie really feel. And Fuad Khan said something. People just quarrel and quarrel and quarrel, and then just get behind the candidate regardless
Yes,
of what,
for the
right?
party, yeah.
So let's just say, I mean, I'll be honest here. The unions through the UNC has put 2 really strong candidates in Labrie and Point Fortin. I mean, Clyde Elder, who was General Secretary of Communication Workers Union, and Mr. Kester, I think his name.
Let's see if I can get it for you.
I'll get that one for you too. But the Point Fortin and Labrie seats have good representation from a Labour perspective. They're really strong. For sure that Mr. Elder has been very, very vocal with regard to how he, with regard to the positioning of Labour and how they, how they felt. And I mean, he was one of those leaders in communication, as Communication Workers Union leader and GenSec. He was very vocal in the last 10 years. But can he really sway the people of Labrie to vote in his favor? How I do it is I compare it to the 2010 results. So because I can't go down to 86 is too far. So in the 2010 results, when there was a huge wave and it swept into the PNM, Labrie survived, Point Fortin survived, the 2 Laventille survived, the 3 Diego Martin survived, right? So the Port of Spain survived. So, it's left to be seen really and truly how angry the population is. But winnability of that magnitude is also based on the value of the candidate and the value proposition placed by virtue of the caliber of the candidate, which is the product, right? And if the product is...
Well, is the product the candidates or the party?
No, the product of the candidate, the product from the party is the candidate.
Okay.
So the product from the candidate, the product from the party is the candidates. The party will be the organization that is producing the product, right? And their marketing strategy is going to be based on what they say, how they say it, what their branding and marketing strategy is. That would be their campaign strategy. So, I mean, when you translate it into business sense, it's very much a copy of one. You have to think outside the box, and you have to be thinking outside the box from a business sense to see how this can work. And it's not that it can't work. I've wrote a whole paper that's waited to be published on how this can work from a business perspective, utilizing the business perspective and translating it into the political arena. And it's not, you have to think innovatively and outside the box. So the product is the candidate, the organization is the company, and your product has to be consistent. It must be high level. It must provide competitive advantage. I had a conversation. I was sitting down yesterday waiting on my cousin to finish. She was doing a teaching course, and I was sitting down waiting. And what I will call an intellectual layman who does not necessarily understand the intricacies of politics like I do, or a political practitioner would do, walked up to me and he said, "So what are we looking at? How it looking? What are we doing?" And I was like, "Well, you tell me, because I don't want to give you I am on a fact-finding mission at all times in this role. I want to know what you all are thinking." And he said, "Well, it doesn't look good." I was like, "Well, why doesn't it look good?" And he said because 2 seats continue to, and it has been so, not because Shane Mohammed is saying so. It is not because I am saying so. It is saying, it is the science is saying so, the polls are saying so, the people are saying so, the activists are saying so, and there is great concern. My motto has simply been all the time, in order to get the UNC across the finish line, is keep 19 because you're almost there. So you hold on to the 19 and make sure there are changes in that 19 needs to be made, and you know, drastic changes as well, right? And pick up 2, which would take you to 21. And you know, you're not, because this is a tight race. It's not an easy walkover. Yes, PNM bad. Yes, PNM is unpopular. Yes, there are concerns about the leadership and potential and what the prime ministership of Stuart Young looks like. But there's also the other factor that while there are a few good men within the PNM, it is clear and it is evident that the few good men within the PNM has not been able to translate the government in being a good government and translating into good governments. The few good men has done this. They've sat down, they've done their work, they've kept their head down, they've done their policies, they've gone out there, they've done their delivery on their ministries, and then they've branded themselves and they've shone. I could call names because we are at the point where we could call names now. One of them is Penelope Beckles. The other one is Amory Brown. Give him credit. Randall Mitchell is doing a great job in tourism and culture. You know, he seems to have found a niche for himself. He may want to go back there. Marvin Gonzalez has taken a lot of beating because of water and water supply, but I think our whole approach to public utilities is flawed from a governance perspective, not from a ministerial perspective, but from a holistic governance perspective. Our system of public utilities is flawed. So, okay, I just gave you 4, right? So you have had a few good men in the middle of, in the midst of the in the government. That does not mean that the government is successful. It means that those individual ministers have done a good job. That good job does not holistically carry the entire government over. The same applies to the opposition. Within the opposition, there is very few good men that has stood out to give the opposition a strong standing against the People's National Movement in opposition. At one point in time,
I want to, because we're out of time, I want to focus in similarly. Are there, I mean, apparently some of the candidates have not been revealed publicly. I find that's, I don't know necessarily agree with that. I don't know what the reason for that is. Because
it's strategy.
I fear that what you're going to do is you're going to reveal the whole slate at the same time, and a lot of the candidates are not going to necessarily get the individual attention they deserve, right? Because you're going to, and this will lead me to a concluding point.
There'll be no hiding. There'll be no hiding of candidates in this round. If for some strange reason somebody is whispering that, you know, you'll get away if you hide X or Y, among all of them, that's not going to happen because that didn't work in 2020. Well, and what you are seeing now is that I just read a comment from a random person that was looking on at a picture, and it's like, you know, this is not the caliber that you want. So really and truly,
so
I've always said it has to be better. The value proposition has to be better.
Is it that you're looking at the UNC slate and the potential candidates, we don't necessarily know who they are, and you're saying this is not necessarily up to scratch here because, and I guess this is where we could both easily agree, we need people to be better. You are saying to win the election. I'm saying our problems are getting worse, and we can't just go with the same level that essentially got us here, the same level that we've had for the last 20 to 30 years.
And it's frustrating because I don't know what in God's name these two particular individuals are waiting to jumpstart their campaign in a more vibrant, more rhythm, more tempo, more competitive manner, which is Barataria, San Juan, Shoguanas East. Shoguanas East being the worst of them all.
It's because I have this complaint with regards to new parties, right? Outside of the COP, every new party that tries to enter the political landscape, okay, we launch in some small press conference of a manner, and then you're like, all right, what are you doing now? What are you doing now? Who you have? What's your plans? What's your next step? Who you gonna see? Who you gonna talk to? What you doing? Is your name getting out there? And that's what frustrates me. Is like they want to start up a new party a year or two away from an election, start slow, and then I guess kind of want to imply, oh, we don't have enough time. It's like, whose fault was that?
So here's my issue with that, right? And I was on Tobago, I was on talking Tobago politics yesterday in Tobago. And we did the same thing we're doing here. We ascertained and we assessed both the PNM and the TPP candidates. I was asked a question about Watson Duke, and I would tell you the same thing. I think Watson Duke does have some limited support in Tobago, but Watson is his own worst enemy. His mouth is his own worst enemy, and his behavior is his own worst enemy. Watson may have good intentions, but he lost that opportunity when he decided to just mash up his whole scene in Tobago. And it's because I didn't get my way. You didn't understand governance. You didn't understand how money is spent. You didn't understand that you can't just go and pick up money in the public treasure from the public purse and hand it to something because of goodwill. That there's a process and a procedure to governance, and governing structures, right, are in place to ensure transparency and accountability. That's one. So Watson might be a one-man show, and not because he is strong or, you know, waveringly strong in Roxborough translates that he is overwhelmingly strong in all of Tobago East now. We will wait to see what happens if he really puts a candidate in the West, which I anticipate he would. But then I also spoke about the IDA, which I call anti-IDA in Tobago, because it's a joke. Why is it a joke? Because Denise Sawyer-Fat Angus is someone of caliber. Denise was a good presiding officer. Denise she walked away from the PNM on principle. Well, when you stand on that level of principle, you should be pushing us. It's either you realize and assess after being in politics for so long that IDA is not formidable, it is not sustainable, and go resort to a side. Pick a side.
Yeah.
It's either you retire from politics altogether and you go back to practice in your private practice, or you revert back to the PN, you mend fences, you mend bridges, and you close the gaps, or you decide to go with one on the other side. And if your car line, Tobago is small, it's impossible to not align with somebody. You can't be so different, right?
Yeah.
What are you doing? You are there, and the thing about it is, she has not put forward a candidate. She's not decided whether she's running herself. And then there's another person by the name of Michaela Pandey who has thrown a candidate into Tobago. And my thing is this. You want to throw a candidate into Tobago, but you've not gotten into Tobago. You've not walked into the Tobago space up to now. You've not gone into Tobago, whether by boat, and I'll quote myself again, whether by boat, plane, or jet ski. You haven't gone over to Tobago. You haven't talked to the people in Scarborough. You haven't gone down and sat down in Mount St. George. You haven't gone down in Plymouth. You haven't gone down in Mason Hill, Blackrock, Newgrange, Speyside, Lansformy, Pulatuvier. You've not done any at Roxborough. So you've gone nowhere, but you've thrown a candidate. So how you expect people to vote for you? So really and truly, what are you doing, right? So there's also a challenge to the new political parties that you have to do the work. You have to do your due diligence. You can't be a spotlight. You can't be behaving like Eddie Hart, like the lights on in Eddie Hart ground only when a football match or when a event is taking place. You appear and I looked at her. She went on into. I was in pan semis on Sunday. I was in pan semis, very casual, very incognito, because I went to enjoy myself. I looked at a video of her in pan semis in her patriotic front t-shirt, and there was people looking at her and staring at her like if she's like what? So you can't. At the end of the day, you have to. Their strategy must be appealing. There are people who've jumped out into the political space and say, "Well, I support Michaela Pandey." That's your right to support Michaela Pandey. But what does Michaela Pandey stand for? So at the end of the day, quality and value proposition is very much in aligned and linked to each other. There's an intersectionality there in terms of looking at it from a business point and looking at it from a political standpoint. What do you go into politics for? What do political parties exist for? For the purposes of attaining power. They are the vehicle and mechanism by which a group of persons who hold a specific ideology and perspective on how a country should be governed, that's the vehicle by which they get into power. How they get into power is based on the issues that they discuss, the solutions that they have, how they communicate that, the people that they put forward that will become the conduits by which the policies are executed in the interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. If they don't understand something very simple as that, go back to your drawing board.
Well, I will hate to say this, or I hate to say this, but I believe that the way how political entities operate in Trinidad, policies as how you and I might expect them to be utilized and marketed and promoted and used in a campaign and used to then what policies are, like, I don't think it's behind closed doors, it's really given, it's really spoken about in those terms or considered in that way.
Honestly, I think that in some, in a great instance, they are. I believe that in, and again, I'm saying this, there are a few good men that see this for, in the greater scheme of things, they see it from the way we see it. Do the leaders see it in that regard? Because
so that leads me to my last point. Because I understand what you said, the candidate was the product. But to me, politics in TNT is more like Apple.
CEO based.
The brand is more treated more like that's the product. That's the value proposition, and not the product itself. Whatever iPhone, ebook, whatever, right? Whether they're copying features from somebody else or innovating their own. Like, really and truly, Apple at its height was at its height because Steve Jobs apparently was able to market the hell out of the thing and make you think, hey, this is the thing to have, even though specs-wise, it's not that dissimilar to its competitors. And in a similar vein, like, as much as we have candidates, it's what Dr. Fuad Khan said. They could mumble, people could complain about the candidates and being changed and who they don't like or who they like, but they'll go back to the party, right? And that's the thing. And I feel as though to some extent now, I don't know if the dam will ever break and we'll see the change, but to some extent for us to politically mature, I do think that we do have to have that change where all of a sudden now what a candidate stands for and what it adds to the party is just as important as the party itself.
So, when I look at it right now, I always say, and people would think I have a bias, but it's not. It's not a bias. It's simple, which is that I look at Tobago because Tobago has been able to do things that Trinidad is yet to have done, which is they went overwhelmingly against the PNM, and the Tobago People's Party read the PDP before. So the current executive council of the THA they understand very much their political landscape. That's one. They're very in tune with its dynamics, its sociological frameworks, its economic needs. They're very, very in tune with that. And that's because a lot of them have started off as on the ground as activists and have graduated into the roles that they have now. Now, is the THA perfect? No. Does it have its shortcoming? Obviously. But is it terribly bad? Absolutely not. There's a huge campaign and a huge attempt, rightfully so, because it's a competition by the PNM to try very difficult, very, very hard to discourage people and, you know, to discredit the work of the Tobago's People's Party and the Executive Council. But at the same time, and even the question was asked, well, why is the Tobago's People's Party taking so long to announce a candidate for Tobago West? And my answer is simple. One, it's not as easy as people think. One, you have to take into consideration that the Tobago West seat is the harder seat of the two to fight and to win. And there has to be, Shamfa Kojo is not necessarily liked, but she is very present. And she is, she's the strongest of the two candidates, give her credit, right? Champa has been able to go in there and, you know, not be toppled over.
Well, it helps that you don't insult your constituents. You insult the neighboring when you say nobody lives in the central.
Yeah, exactly, right? So, I mean, yeah, for real.
You sink your pair, but you leave your base untouched.
Of course, right? And I mean, at the end of the day, when you look at, so the idea here is that the Tobago People's Party needs to clinically, and that is what, in my opinion, they are doing. They're clinically assessing who has submitted themselves. Are they palatable? Are they a good representation of our product? Are they, when you put down the value proposition against what exists, which is our competitors in the market, we need to be above the rest. We need to choose from among ourselves the best. And that person must be able, when you drop the individual into the limelight, it must kaboom, blow up. It must and it must mean that tempo, that excitement, that it must sustain all the way to the general election whenever that day is, right? So they understand how this is done because they have entered the arena of literally represents what is a new generation of leaders. Now, we can't say the same here in Trinidad. I mean, everybody believes that Michaela Pandey is promising. I beg to differ. There are a lot of people who doesn't believe that Michaela Pandey is as promising as she should be.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's even Michaela is not generating a level of excitement, you know, that you would expect as a new generational leader. It should have been, whoa. It is not whoa. And that's because the strategy has been wrong.
I mean, would you say at the very least any new entity should have a similar initial buzz like the COP? Because again, I remember even where I am in a PNM stronghold, you had COP supporters, you know, on the ground. We're not talking about the candidate having to do everything. People came out to try to encourage other people, and yet they didn't get any seats, but they got votes, and it set a foundation that no other third party after them has had the patience to go through that motion, to think about the long term as opposed to, we're a year out of election, we're going to launch something and hope for the best. It's like this half-cocked nonsense.
And to the credit of the COP, they timed it very well. And to the credit of Mr. Dukaran, he had a strategy. And to the credit of Mr. Dukaran, he had a very high caliber of candidates in 2007. Even his executive was extremely, in what I would call in the business world, in HR, from an HR perspective, Mr. Dukaran had what we call a high performance working executive, right? Which it's not only was about personalities, it was about competence, and there were very strong persons within the COP executive. Now, that is what I think had the potential to happen within the Patriotic Front, because take into consideration the Patriotic Front has been in existence longer than the time frame that the COP had been in existence in the run-up to a general election. Right? So, therefore, there should have been a wave. Now, unfortunately, the Patriotic Front is, like the PDP, is all about Watson Duke, is all about Michaela Pandey. The COP, while its leader was Winston Dukaran, it was way beyond Winston Dukaran.
I want to close before we open up the phone lines, just to say, because you were saying there was a high-powered executive with the COP when it launched. But one of the things I find we need to ask, that's not that common, I think, at least in TNT. I've heard stories about people sitting on various boards. You could look at the executive of various political parties. When I say boards, state boards, but also you could even look at certain private institutions, their boards, et cetera, and their management teams and leadership and so forth. And I just wonder, as a society, are we just too complacent, too laissez-faire, too, not professional? We don't have a sense of urgency. We don't have a sense of drive that's potentially missing and keeping us back from really developing, one, as a society, but two, with regards to our politics. Because it's just business as usual. When you look at across the board, it's business as usual. You said it yourself, you're not seeing certain things from the private sector. And I would argue, and I think you implied it as well, if not said it outright, you're not seeing similar things from the political sector.
No, you're not. So in the private sector, I think there's a lot of things that are happening within the private sector, but it's happening within the confines of their boardrooms and within the privacy of their meetings and that sort of thing. You are seeing things happening. So, for example, let's just take Carib, for example. Carib is expanding and growing its business. They're existing in Trinidad. They're producing new products. They're outside of of Trinidad and Tobago in terms of the number of breweries that they have, etc., etc. Angostura is doing pretty good as well. They could do better in terms of repositioning themselves internationally under Trinidad and Tobago brand. And Samakal is doing well. I mean, all of these private entities are doing really well. The question is our political directorate doing its side of the job? So when you look at, remember, all of these private institutions are also regulated by a governance structure, a legal framework, and how we as a government, and I say we as a government, I mean all of us as stakeholders, right?
Yes.
How does the Trinidad and Tobago government, is it positioning itself for foreign direct investment, economic diversification, food security, regulation of foreign exchange, you know, are we attractive? Are we leveraging the economy for one that has the opportunities for growth and development? And or is it that because of that political will to get everything I just mentioned done, they've stymied the private sector, so then the private sector has no other choice but to sustain what it has here and take its level of excitement outside of Trinidad and Tobago, which is what I think is the case.
Yeah. I think our Forex challenges actually directly contributes to what you just said. How can you justify investing more when you have Forex difficulties to sustain yourself, but also if you want to take money out to do other things, there's a chance that you can't. And foreign direct investment even worse.
This government has done a great injustice to the opportunities available to us in foreign direct investment, because they've reversed the ability of companies to come into Trinidad, set up shop, and they've made the ease of doing business in Trinidad and Tobago very bureaucratic, very, very bureaucratic. And that was one of the number one achievements of the partnership administration under Vasan Bharat as Minister of Trade, which was to ensure that the ease of doing business with the government of Trinidad and Tobago he dubbed it from red tape to red carpet. That initiative was one of the best initiatives that we could have instituted to allow for a foreign direct investment, a swarm of foreign companies coming into Trinidad and investing and using Trinidad and Tobago as a hub to blow up into the region and into the Western Hemisphere. My experience has been where there has been a British, in one particular example, a British businessman wanted to come to Trinidad and invest a lot of money into one of Trinidad's sectors. But when he realized that it took almost 2 weeks to a month to register his business, and then all of the different paperwork he had to go through took longer than he anticipated to get this business set up in Trinidad and Tobago. When he looked around, he realized that Barbados was more favorable. And obviously, Mia Motley, being the transformational leader that she is, she's telling everybody, come, I am going to do what is needed to boost my economy. I am going to do everything that is going to diversify my economy. I'm going to do everything that is going to position Barbados for economic growth and development. And the question is, has she done it? Absolutely yes. In fact, she's one of the most respected leaders, if not the most respected regional leader in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do you get to that point? Value proposition, value creation, value capture.
You said that four-letter word, diversification, again. You know? That's the one.
Yeah.
It's a four-letter word right now in politics. That's the only thing I can think about. Right? Oh boy. All right, we'll open the phone lines. For those who want to call in, you could call in and have your say. Yes, there are things that I have not spoken about yet. Even in the week, I haven't even technically given my opinion on what's going on with the police promotions. I want to save that for when I have time to do it. But you can call in, ask Dr. Mohammed any questions. And I get it. One of the things is people need to understand, criticizing the government, it's just one of those things. It's not about hating on the PNM. It's that they're the incumbent. This is part of the disadvantage in an election cycle of being the incumbent. You know, there's no real way around that. We can't talk about other political parties when it comes to foreign direct investment and what they did in the last 5 years, because no one else for the most part. In fact, you'll be kind of looking at them funny if somehow they had control over foreign direct investment as a third party or the opposition. But like I said, folks, you can call in and have your say. The phone number should be up on your screen. If you do call in, just please don't try to follow your conversation on TV. Now, I'm not sure if we're going to get much calls. Today seems to be a bit of a busy day. A lot of people are out quite early. There was a fair amount of traffic around Savannah this morning. I did want to ask, though, because you pointed to Vasa Bharat as Minister of Trade for the People's Partnership. Is he truly back with the UNC? Oh, well, before we get there, I get the question off and then we have the caller. San Fernando on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Good morning to my favorite geopolitical analyst.
Good morning, Mr. San Fernando, I have to ask, do you know any other geopolitical analysts? It's like,
if I was in the U.S., I would say I would invoke my Fifth Amendment right.
Okay.
You know, I'm listening to the conversation this morning, and let me say this. I think the Trinidad and Tobago government, this government that we've had here in the last, I would actually say the last 15 years, most of it is the PNM, they have not been serious about the economic future of this country. And let me tell you why. And let me give an instance. You see this FIU? Every year you hear how many suspicious transactions that we have in the system, Sean. And there is no effort, in my opinion, to deal with these. You say almost billions in suspicious transactions, but then we hear nothing after that. And let me give you a quick instance of how this thing is supposed to operate. A few years ago, I was doing business with a gentleman in the Dominican Republic. I wired some money to him because he had to go and look at something for me in Curacao, Aruba. So I wired the money to him through my bank in Trinidad. I did that the morning. I got a call the afternoon from the bank telling me that the money, the transfer was stopped by the Office of Foreign Asset Control. Now, I was familiar with the Foreign Asset Control Department because I used to work for an international company and we dealt with them. Mm-hmm. The money was held by them. And they asked for all my details. The next morning, Sean, I got a call from the Office of Foreign Asset Control in the U.S. inquiring what this transaction was about, and they requested all the information. I had to send them all the emails and everything. They said to me, this gentleman is suspected of a suspected drug trafficker. And I spoke to the gentleman. I told him, I called back. He said, no, he isn't. And I said, okay, if he isn't, let him go in. There's a DA office in the Dominican Republic, and let him go in there if he's not the person that we suspect. And the gentleman did go in there the next day, and the money was released because he just had a similar name, but he was not the person. But this happened in a matter of 3 days, Sean. Everything was cleared up. And so I am saying, what is happening in our country here? What is really going on? If it is that you can't, you only have, we have institutions that we put in place, and then they are non-functional, and these are the things that lead to the detriment of our economy, because the international bodies are looking at this, at us, and if it is that we can't control these things, then people are not serious down there, man. And that is one of the things that is making the unease in doing business in Trinidad and Tobago, because the institutions that we're supposed to safeguard are not serious, and the international bodies are looking at that, and then what is the recommendation? Don't go along and do business in Trinidad and Tobago, you know. They're not serious down there.
Agreed.
Have a good day, gentlemen. Nice seeing you, Dr. Mohammed.
Thank you.
You know, the thing, he's so right. The thing is, when one of the drivers of foreign direct investment, and one of the drivers of the main drivers of foreign direct investment, for that matter, is the ease of doing business. And one of the things that people look at in the index of ease of doing business is our bureaucracy and our processes and procedures. And this is where I have to give licks to Paula Gopi's school. Paula Gopi's school is one of those, I mean, very lovely lady. I mean, but lovely doesn't, being a lovely lady doesn't help her cause as a minister. You know, she had the opportunity to take up the mantle. She's been the Minister of Trade since inception. She's not changed her portfolio since 2015 when the government changed. And she was given a really good platform from the Vassan Bharat, based on the work that Vassan Bharat would have done. And for the most part, she squandered the goodwill of having inherited good structures and frameworks from a high-performing minister. She dismantled the Free Zone Company of Trinidad and Tobago. And I could tell you from my own experience, when the Free Zone, when the governments changed, there were over 100 companies that were waiting for approval to come into Trinidad and operate in various sectors, and they all left. And to tell you how they didn't take the seriousness of that particular board, that board was diminished from a 9-member board to a 3-member board, and it's 3 people who just collected a stipend and did no work. So, you know, one of these things that I think in the government structure of a new administration that needs to be looked at is the checks and balances from a ministerial/governmental perspective on the performance of these state entities. And what we have is no monitoring and evaluation of how state boards are functioning. The only state board that people seem to be focused on is Heritage, NGC, NP, and Caribbean Airlines. That's it. You would swear to God there's no others, right? I mean, we need to do better. Port Authority, Plipdeco,
oh gosh, yes.
Labidco, those are the only ones. And even if we take
Port Authority, I'm like, Plipdeco, like, I'm not seeing the things.
Yeah. Listen, when you look at Labidco, Plipdeco, and Port Authority, I have a question. Why do we have 3 separate entities for 3 ports in Trinidad? And I'm like, what? Okay, if you explain to me that one is for this, one is for that, one is for that, they could all be consolidated, but it is because we lack the vision to consolidate, restructure, and then delegate the work accordingly, and so that people have efficiency and effectiveness, but also a level of accountability and transparency. Why are we having these problems? Why are we not utilizing our ports? I mean, her credit as well. Mrs. Prasad-Bisasa had an excellent perspective and an excellent view on how we should utilize those 3 ports in particular, especially in Lebre. The government, throw it aside. Right? It didn't matter.
The thing is, I guess part of it is, it's their idea, so we'll discard it.
But Sean, and this is the problem that I'm having. Why are we not matured enough to know that? Even if the idea came from another government, when you assess that idea or that project or that plan, if it's a good plan, why not execute it? Because it's not for the greater good of...
Because they don't have the ability to properly communicate and be transparent.
Well, you know, I look at all of the RHAs. All of the RHAs are in shambles. Every single one of the RHAs are in shambles. There's not one except in Tobago that is not actually working effectively and taking responsibility. And it's because worker burnout, doctors are on contracts, politics in administration.
Politics.
Oh God! How could you have politics in healthcare?
The thing about it is that whole Port of Spain General thing, I don't think has been properly resolved to the public satisfaction, and that's a public interest. It's not just a private legal matter, right? With regards to the NICU and what seemingly was a collapse of standards in the NICU, right? But I'll just say this though, and I think a lot of our issues could be oversimplified by the statement, no political will to enforce our laws, and then by extension, regulations, protocols, policies, etc. No political will. And it's not just all about corruption. I think a good chunk of it is just that inability to be able to function outside of the box, especially when you get glimpses. Some of the outside the box thinking comes from the other side, and we have to automatically poo-poo that and discredit that. So then what do? Then it's like, well, we can't go outside the box, so we have to stay within the box. And we just get this cycle of the same old. And we're not, the thing is, when I say our laws, it's not just laws about gang activity. It's all the laws, from the little things like parking all the way up to regulation of private entities and financial regulation, back to Mrs. Fernando's point about the FIU. And I think that lack of political will also is seen in other areas with regards to development. But then to go back to Mrs. Fernando's point, I think part of it too is because the government says, oh, we're in compliance with this, so we pass this law to be in compliance with that. Well, we have the laws on the books, but what about implementation? Because when we have foreign agencies basically saying, hey, by the way, you see human trafficking, senior government officials are involved, they're going to look at our capacity to implement law enforcement and to enforce our laws and to stop lawbreakers and corruption. And they're going to say, yeah, they could pass all these laws to be in compliance if we want. But then we have to actually see now, walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And I think you're right. To some extent, we're probably under a bigger microscope than we think. And that's one of the reasons why Mr. San Fernando had that happen to him. Because they were looking at transactions coming out to Trinidad for a reason.
No, listen, political will is a big deal. So, for example, my colleagues and I are currently working on a panel or a paper that is going to focus on the theme of our conference this year for the International Leadership Association is leading together, right? That there's that more need, there's a greater need for collaborative leadership, and I mean collaborative leadership that is sustainable and in long term and sees the bigger picture. And is while we may have, I mean, take for example, you and I, Sean, may not necessarily agree on everything, but there's a commonality in our differences, which is we can find a middle ground and compromise, and there's shared values between both of us. You have to take it from a very practical perspective. I speak to people, and my colleagues are on the international forum. We're from all different parts of the Western Hemisphere, right? Our newest addition to our team is somebody from India, and getting a different perspective doesn't necessarily mean that I feel threatened or another member of my team feels threatened, but different perspective is a good thing because it adds to the greater value of what your intention is. It provides a different perspective, an out-of-the-box perspective. It may provide you with a case study that emanates from a country that we didn't even was paying attention to and say, look, everybody wants to talk about the Singapore model, the Singapore model, the Singapore model. But what about a different model in a similar island with similar characteristics of Trinidad and Tobago? So let's maybe just throw out a wild... what about the Mauritius model?
Yeah.
What is the corruption level in the island of Mauritius? What does the governance level in the index look like in the island of Mauritius? The access to services, the access of goods, how does their public sector framework work? What are what is the level of satisfaction from the services dealt with by government? How do they hold their government accountable? Let's look at it. Let me not go big, because clearly for the last 40 years we've been talking Singapore, and Singapore is 40 years, 50 years, 80 years ahead of us in everything. So where have we fallen short, and why have we fallen short? We've fallen short because we seem to be caught up in this is how it's been done, this is how we have done it for the last 40 years, and that has put us absolutely nowhere in the greater scheme of things. And therefore, I believe that in this election, there has to be hard decisions that must be made. Unfortunately, the owners, she may or may not say, well, why it is everything is what the UNC doing, what the UNC doing. The same answer you said. It's the same response that you give with regard to why we're talking about the government, because they are in power. They are the incumbents, right? The reason why there's a higher standard held to the TPP in Tobago, because they are in quote-unquote parliamentary opposition to the PNM. And in Trinidad and Tobago, the alternative is the UNC. And the UNC, therefore, needs to raise the game, raise its caliber, raise its cadre of its product. And its product right now is not... So I look at it as a pendulum swinging. The pendulum is not swinging very fast. It's very much middle line. And that's dangerous for an opposition, because most likely when the pendulum isn't swinging very fast, it may end up just staying in the direction of who? The incumbent. Do we really believe, right, that these people on paper looks good, but we know what these people in practice looks like? And can we really put our trust and confidence in a group of persons who had 10 years and they're young, energetic, you know, they represent everything people are looking for? Were they able to really and truly deliver holistically? And the answer to that question is no, they have not.
We do have to close, so I'll just like to wrap it up. 62 years of independence, and it seems like we're still operating like a nation that's 22 years old, right? Like, our immaturity in politics, I think, it might be worse than we like to think. Thanks to Mr. Safana for calling in. Thanks, Dr. Shimahoy, for joining me for this extended conversation. Touched on a lot of things, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah, we did.
Folks, this is Talking About on WESN. Just wanted to tell you, like Mr. Shaw would always say, make today a good day. You can do it if you try, and we need more people to make that attempt, not just for yourself, but for the people around you. Stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. And no matter who you meet today, always remember, it's nice to be nice, even to people you might not like. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Hi, I'm Claudette, radiographer at the radiology departments at the community hospital. We offer high-quality service with state-of-the-art equipment in X-ray, ultrasound, CT, and mammogram. Come, our friendly staff awaits you.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River